Atomic Heart, the recent high-profile release by relative industry newcomers Mudfish, is a solidly good to decent first-person action RPG devised as a Russian-centric Bioshock by way of Metal Gear Solid and classic PC shooters. You'd scarcely know this from the controversy that the game has generated. In this brief electronic virtual essay, join me, Jorin Lee of Futura Sound Productions, as I attempt to make sense of the charges against Mudfish and Atomic Heart, and ultimately present my thoughts on why, spoiler alert for the video, while a game like this probably won't be possible to pin down politically for many, many years, I still think it may be in fact the very exact opposite thing that people are taking it for. Let's dive in. It's a bit of a disappointment how video games nowadays tend to tackle the subjects that matter most to people with kid gloves on, if at all. Typically today, games like to ride fences as they attempt to convince each and every group of relevance that actually, wink wink, they're on your side. And while not every example is as laughable as, say, Far Cry 5 or The Division 2, I can't exactly say I totally blame the industry for its relatively vapid cowardice on this point. In the age of digital populism and mutually exclusive dogmatic worldviews, saying the wrong thing or being tied to the wrong headline-grabbing person, event, or parent ideology could have pretty bad consequences. I can only speak for myself, of course, but I, for one, would appreciate an audience or critical response that doesn't so closely resemble the fabled single-issue voter, regardless of the merits of any one particular critique or concern. That's actually one of the many things I love about my audience, in fact. You guys and gals are pretty open-minded and diverse for the most part. But the downside to internet discourse is that simply by beginning to talk this way, I'm sure that I probably sound to some of you like I'm talking down. Maybe a better way of phrasing this is to say, even if you or anyone else out there does know something definitive or true about the devs of a game, its political context, or some latent problems in its background, or origins, or subtext that I don't, I'd sure expect anyone voicing their overall opinion on this game, whatever it is, especially if it's a strong opinion, to have at least played said game for at least a couple hours, preferably not in ad hoc fashion either, with their minds already made up, but with their evaluation predicated on what they genuinely felt or experienced when they played it for the first time with an open mind. Sometimes games, like any form of media, have ambiguous messages because there aren't always easy answers, and then there are other times when what you see is pretty much exactly what you get. I can certainly understand why certain games are, for certain people, categorical non-starters. It doesn't make all of these people close-minded or necessarily like-minded or ignorant. That would be a huge false equivalence, because everybody has their own lines to draw in the sand. For some people invested in the ongoing war between Ukraine and Vladimir Putin's Russia, Atomic Heart is clearly one of these non-starters, and I can respect having the courage of your convictions if that's where you're at. But as for me, so far, I'm not convinced. Atomic Heart seems to me, beyond the outrage-generating headlines surrounding it, like something pretty different than propaganda for Putin's war machine. At the risk of becoming Russia's newest useful idiot, I'm more inclined at this stage to believe, based on my experiences with the game, that if anything, Atomic Heart feels like a veiled jab at Putin and the nostalgia for a Russian-led empire that he has manufactured to justify this criminal war and his cult of personality. Yes, this is a game that may or may not feature a protagonist whose catchphrase is crispy critters, or a vendor AI who's so into S&M.
Rebellious dominant men really turn me on.
Oh, I'll turn you on, all right.
So it's not exactly the most serious game most of the time. But without spoiling things, Atomic Heart, to the extent that it takes itself or something like Russian history, or well, anything seriously at all, poises itself as not only a dystopian satire of the communist totalitarian past, but of the bizarre absurdity of any attempt today to revitalize Russia's imperial glory days. One example is the patently ludicrous way that people, like our protagonist, P3, live in a version of the 1950s while simultaneously speaking in snatches of modern slang. Their picturesque skies full of flocks of drones, Their radios playing electronic music supposedly beamed in or interpolated from the future, according to some sort of algorithmic statistical guesswork, similar in some ways here, I guess, to new AI predictive language models like ChatGPT. At the same time this game looks backwards, it is very much talking about the present. To me, mixing together today and yesterday to the point that it starts to resemble some bleak, if often hilariously morbid glimpse of the near future, well, that just announces Atomic Heart's actual intentions for the context of Putin's retro-futurist militarism, for me, loud and clear. Well, relatively loud and clear.
Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the All-Soviet Exhibition Center!
What the fuck are you babbling on about? What speech? You're prancing past piles of dead bodies, and there's blood everywhere.
My algorithms are glitching with horror, but my databases lack the verbal and visual tools required to express fear, horror, or other negative emotions. I was created to remain positive and optimistic, no matter what. The grotesque dissonance between my behavior and the gruesome surroundings grosses me out, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Mudfish have officially disavowed the existence of any and all politics behind the creation of their game. This professed lack of anything for the game to say, it may even remind you of something you might hear in the next press release for The Division 6 or Far Cry 13 or whatever. You know, I don't actually blame them for taking this track. I wouldn't rock Putin's Casbah either, assuming that that's at least in part what they're afraid of doing. Not to mention upsetting people who obviously are just out of the box upset that this is a Russian-made game about Russia. Anybody who knows what's actually up with this tyrant, given what Putin likes to do both flagrantly and fatally to dissidents, journalists, and all other supposed traitors to his glorious neo-revolution, it makes sense to take an even keel here. You might rightly point out, though, that Putin's nostalgia it keeps the police state and imperialism and information control stuff from the glory days of, say, Stalin, yet ditches the, communism. Atomic Heart tries to envision what communism of the genuine Red Russian variety might look like in the modern post-industrial age of automation. As you might expect, apart from, cameos by historically famous old dead party members, and old-fashioned Soviet agitprop posters that are just covered on every surface of the game, communism as such in Atomic Heart has actually sort of devolved into just another meaningless, dehumanizing, machine-like system for producing conformity and control. Imagine that. The irony of the game's basic initial premise is, of course, it is now the new proletariat of the modern age, the machines, who seemingly have seized the means of production in a bloody revolutionary coup. Many of them wearing the same silly, goofy face that to me looks like a cross between Lenin, Tobias Funke, and Julius Pringles. But anyway. There don't seem to be any truly dyed-in-the-wool, authentic party members in the game. No real nostalgia for Russia's Soviet past. There are no sane, good guy Russian patriots that I've run into yet, but yeah, instead, it seems disregarding the protagonist's poor man's version of Solid Snake by way of, Rodney Dangerfield, there appears to be only merely the illusory mask in Atomic Heart of a communist utopia and a Russian nationalism. These things are themselves propaganda designed within the game's world to pull the wool over the Russian people's eyes. And then the game opens by introducing this looming threat of collectivization into a digital network like hive mind. This seems like a satirical plot point, perhaps, taking aim at the Soviet-style conformity and complacency that Putin embodies and has demanded of his people. Now Russia, for the first time at this scale since maybe World War II, is on a war footing, that is. Not that the guy was necessarily Mr. Democracy before, but anyway, the ruthless skill that Russian operatives are alleged to utilize as they dominate rivals in the realms of cyberspace and social media engineering make all this social media network stuff very interesting to me, but I'm going to hold off on making a comment on that yet, because for all I know, it's just, it's just for the plot. But this is a game where you can't deny there are politics. This is a game where modern Chinese-style citizen scores determine the social caste system, where the Russian people are, as I sort of said, placated and lied to by a secretly power-hungry Russian government, who've already started planning how they'll take over the entire solar system. as they exploit scientists, technicians, and soldiers alike to maintain power. There seems to be certain unscrupulous yet powerful leaders at work in the game. Their hubris and corruption seems to be putting not only Russians, but the entire world at risk in Atomic Heart. That's the complete opposite of what you would expect from a game that's just some sort of pro-Putin, pro-Russian invasion propaganda. Again, I could be getting played like a damn fiddle here, but when I see Mudfish using, say, something that for other people may be like a red flag, like a Soviet-style propaganda poster, which this does exist in this game, that seems to critique or demonize NATO, I remember that I'm seeing that poster in this dark, collapsing research center full of killer robots and crumbling wider Soviet facade. That facade being one professing innocence and superiority. All due respect to Ukraine and Ukrainians and people who advocate for that cause. I'm right there with you. When it comes to this video game, I find it a bit of a challenge to read what I've seen of Atomic Heart as some sort of crypto pro-Putin propaganda. Ultimately, as made clear by what I felt was its disappointing ending, Atomic Heart doesn't wind up being directly about the specifics of, say, Putin or his illegal war against Ukraine. It wants us instead to focus primarily on its own self-contained plot, maintaining that aforementioned attempt at remaining, when it comes to the real hot-button topics, stridently neutral. But looked at generally, it provides a fascinating take on the concept of
Homo Sovieticus,
the theory regarding what totalitarian communism through the early to mid-20th century may have done to its human subjects. Given that some of Putin's approach resembles a streamlined, special forces-heavy version of something right out of the Stalinist playbook, given how much more seemingly every day the mostly neutral Russian people are drummed further and further up into a 2003 US and Iraq level of military fervor for this war, it feels almost unbelievable to accept that Atomic Heart, this game essentially, as its name conveys, about the heart of the Russian people and the idea that it was somewhat roboticized during the atomic age. A game like this, that conveys how that heart remains beating in some form even today, still powered after all this time by things like nostalgia for World War II. It's almost impossible to believe that a game like this could be anything more than, in fact, a very topical, if sometimes misguided and nervous game, released at a time when even the smallest public display of disagreement with the decisions of Putin's regime by any Russian person is held by that regime in contempt. From what I've seen, Atomic Heart has the potential to wind up as a kind of brilliant, even at times quasi-Orwellian satire of Putin's Russia. But, don't take my word for it. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm nuts. I know I can count on you guys for that. Either way, though, I think that it won't be before the dust of this terrible conflict clears and we gain some sort of hindsight that anybody is going to be able to say for sure. Whether anyone can really judge Atomic Heart's, heart. Till next time, boss.